She doesn't want your hand first, she wants your presence to touch her soul. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But most men miss this entirely. They try to touch the body before they've ever touched the mind, the attention, the essence. And that's why they remain forgettable. If you understand this, if you master it, you won't need pickup lines, flexed muscles, or a perfect jawline. You'll become the kind of man women feel before you've even spoken. Because true seduction starts with energy, with awareness, with the invisible field you carry when you enter a room. You see, a woman's attention is the first gate, and it cannot be forced. It must be earned with weight, masculine weight, the kind that doesn't move unless it chooses to. Most men try to win her attention by chasing it, by flooding her senses with compliments, jokes, overexposure. But the magnetic man, he does something far more powerful. He pauses, he slows time. He stands in his own gravity while the rest of the world scrambles for validation. He doesn't scan the room. He owns it, not with arrogance, but with quiet command. And that silence, that stillness makes her turn toward him, curious, open, subtly awakened. This is where the first real touch happens, not on her body, but in her awareness. A man like that enters her mind like a scent she can't place. Not overwhelming, just present, just enough to haunt the back of her thoughts. Because he doesn't force himself into her world. He simply exists in it with such unapologetic presence that she begins to lean closer, without knowing why. And just as her mind begins to turn, her second hunger begins to stir. A woman's attraction isn't linear. It's spiral, circular, magnetic, and curiosity is the spark. Once you have her attention, she wants to be kept in mystery. Not confusion, mystery. The difference is subtle, but essential. Confusion makes her anxious. Mystery makes her ache. This is where most men fail. They reveal too much, too soon. They explain, overshare, rationalize. They try to make her understand them, when all she really wants is to feel them. And no woman feels desire for something fully exposed. Desire needs tension, distance, space. You want to become a mansion with closed doors. A man with a past he doesn't parade. A man with motives she can't map. Not because you're hiding, but because you've evolved beyond the need to be seen by everyone. This is the difference between a man who begs for her attention and a man whose very silence seduces her deeper. Think of it like this. One man sends a barrage of texts hoping she'll laugh. Another man sends one message that feels like a whisper in the dark. "You crossed my mind, that's all." And think nothing. He returns to his path, his mission, his purpose. And that absence, that restraint, that is what ignites her curiosity like a flame that finds oxygen. And when that flame begins to grow, the emotional body awakens. Because no matter how intellectual, independent, or rational she may seem, at her core, the feminine is emotion. It is energy in motion. It is fluid, wild, deep, unpredictable. And to touch a woman here, you must be something most men are terrified of, emotionally sovereign. You must be the man who doesn't flinch when she cries, who doesn't shrink when she's angry, who doesn't need to fix her pain to remain in it. You simply remain, present, calm, anchored. In the language of Jung, this is shadow work. It's emotional intelligence forged in the fire of your own darkness. Because you faced yourself, her chaos no longer intimidates you. You don't try to control her feelings. You witness them, you hold space for them, and in doing so, you become the rarest kind of man, a storm shelter for her soul. So many men respond to her emotions with logic, with empty reassurance, with uncomfortable silence. But the magnetic man, he listens between her words. He hears the unsaid, and he doesn't rush to solve it. He reflects it. He looks into her storm and says without speaking, "I am not afraid of you." That, to a woman, is unforgettable. And from that emotional intimacy, another gateway opens. Her voice. Most men hear her words, but they miss her truth. Because when a woman speaks vulnerably, especially to a man she's drawn to, it's not just communication, it's offering, invitation, access. And how you respond to her voice will determine whether she ever gives you more. The way you respond to her voice is the way you respond to her being. A woman doesn't need to be agreed with. She needs to be received. She needs to feel like her truth can exist in your presence without being diminished. If she tells you her fears, her frustrations, her hopes, you must realize this is not small talk. This is soul talk. This is the moment she peeks beyond her persona and shows you a glimpse of the real. And in that moment, you don't interrupt. You don't deflect. You don't fix. You receive. You pause before speaking. You breathe her in. You give her silence that says, "I hear you fully." And this alone makes her feel safe in a way her body recognizes before her mind can name it. This is the kind of touch that happens in the unseen. No fingers, no skin, just resonance. And it's what makes a woman lean in with the kind of attention she used to reserve for dreams. But even dreams require safety, and there is one place you must touch if you ever want to earn the deepest parts of her. Her boundaries. This is where boys fail and kings rise, because too many men see boundaries as rejection, when in truth they are invitation. They are the outer walls of her palace, and if you violate them, she will never let you in. But if you respect them not just with words, but with your energy, she will open gates you didn't even know existed. The moment she says no, do you lean back with grace or press forward with insecurity? Your reaction reveals everything. If you smile, if you honor her pace, if you show zero resentment, you become a man she can trust with her eyes. And that trust, it's sacred. Because now, she knows you are not ruled by hunger. You are ruled by presence. You are not trying to get something. You are offering something. And that changes the entire dynamic. You stop being another man who wants her, and you become the man she wants to be wanted by. Then comes the final gateway the one most never reach. Her senses. You see, logic lives in the mind, but desire lives in the body. And the body is a sensory cathedral site. Sound, vibe, energy. These are the ancient languages. The ones Jung called symbolic, intuitive, archetypal. They bypass intellect and speak directly to the feminine soul. A woman doesn't remember what you said. She remembers how you looked at her, how your hand hovered near hers, how your voice dropped to a whisper at the right moment. She remembers the pause before the kiss, the breath before the touch. She doesn't want to be rushed into feeling. She wants to be reminded she's alive. You want to touch her, make her feel more of herself in your presence than she does alone. Let her senses bloom in your energy like petals opening to sun. And when she feels that, she won't just want your body, she'll crave your presence. Because you will have touched her in the 7 places no one else dares to go. Which of these have you mastered? And which one will you begin practicing now? I want to hear from you. The most powerful men are not the loudest. They are the ones who make her feel without touching her at all. Once you've stirred her senses and awakened her attention, the game doesn't end, it deepens. Because now she's watching. She's studying the spaces between your words, the posture behind your smile, the energy beneath your stillness. And here's what most men never realizing. The feminine is not evaluating what you do. She is feeling who you are. Not the version you perform, but the one you revert to when no one's watching. That's why the next place she wants to be touched is in your integrity. Not moral purity, not perfection, but alignment. A man whose words and actions belong to the same spine. She doesn't need to be flawless, but she needs to feel that you are real. That when you say you will protect her, emotionally, mentally, physically, you mean it. Not as performance, but as instinct. You see, the feminine doesn't just crave pleasure. She craves containment. A man who can hold his frame when tested. A man whose presence makes her feel safe enough to let go. But if your energy is scattered, if your convictions are soft, if your direction is unclear, she'll feel it in her body before her mind can explain it. A man who lacks internal order cannot give her external security, and no woman can surrender to a man she does not trust. This is what Jung called individuation, the inner process of becoming whole, not by hiding your flaws, but by integrating them, by owning your shadow so fully that no part of you remains disowned. Because the more of yourself you claim, the less of yourself you leak. And that integrity touches her deeper than any compliment ever could. She doesn't want your charm, she wants your truth. And that truth, when embodied, becomes the foundation of magnetism. Because now you are no longer trying to impress her, you are inviting her to rest in you. And the woman who feels safe becomes a woman who feels sensual. But there's a secret most men never learn. A woman cannot access her full sensuality unless she first feels seen, not for her beauty, not for her body, not even for her mind, but for her essence. The next place she wants to be touched is in her uniqueness. Every woman secretly wonders, son, will he see something in me no one else has ever seen? Not just admire me, but recognize me. This is not about praise. It's about depth. It's about being witnessed beyond the mask, the performance, the roles she plays for the world. The magnetic man doesn't just notice her lipstick or her laugh. He senses the sadness behind her eyes. He sees the girl behind the goddess. He meets the soul behind the surface. And when he speaks to that part of her, gently, precisely, with reverence, she doesn't just feel complimented. She feels found. That kind of attention is rare, because it requires you to actually listen, to look, to be present enough to notice what most overlook. The books on her shelf, the way her voice changes when she talks about her dreams, the nervous habits, the unfinished sentences. This is where the feminine begins to open, not from seduction, but from recognition. Because now, she's not just a body being admired, she's a soul being seen. And in that seeing, something ancient awakens inside her. The sacred feminine, the wild, the divine, the part of her that doesn't perform or pretend, but simply is. That part only emerges when she feels truly, intimately understood. And that understanding, it doesn't come from technique, it comes from presence. But presence requires something brutal, silence. Most men fill silence with noise, nervous chatter, jokes, empty compliments. But the man who is still, who can hold her gaze without needing to impress, who can let the silence stretch without fear, that man touches her mind in a way that makes her body melt. Because in that silence, she feels his strength, his restraint, his depth. You don't need to always know the perfect thing to say. You just need to be able to hold the space between her words. And when you do that, she'll begin to trust you with something she rarely reveals, say, her inner chaos. You see, the feminine isn't linear. She is emotional weather. She can be sunshine in the morning and thunder at night. And the man who flinches at this will never touch her soul. But the man who understands her storms as sacred, who welcomes them without needing to control things, who stands still while she spins, that man becomes unforgettable. Because he doesn't try to tame her, he reflects her. And when she sees herself reflected, not judged, not fixed, not dismissed, but honored in all her wildness, she relaxes, she softens, she opens, and suddenly your touch means something more. Now, when your hand brushes her shoulder, when your fingers trace her back, when your voice whispers her name, it isn't just physical, it's layered, emotional, archetypal. She's not just feeling your skin, she's feeling your presence behind it. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of anima. The feminine within the masculine, the receptive power, the quiet knowing, the empathy that doesn't weaken your masculine frame but deepens it. When a man has touched his inner feminine, he can touch her outer feminine with wisdom, with sensitivity, with precision. He doesn't overwhelm her. He tunes into her. He doesn't try to take. He creates the space for her to give. And what she gives in that state is sacred. It's not just sex. It's not just connection. It's transmission. She gives you access to a realm of intimacy that only the most emotionally awake men ever reach. But only if you've earned it. Only if you've touched her, not just in body, but in attention, in safety, in soul, in truth. And most importantly, only if you've touched your own self that deeply first. Because a woman cannot be more vulnerable with you than you've been with yourself. You cannot take her deeper than you've gone. You cannot offer her a container if your own soul is in chaos. You must be the sanctuary, the still point, the mirror that doesn't shatter when she reveals her fire. This is not softness. This is power. This is what makes you magnetic, memorable, irresistible. So I ask you, what kind of man are you becoming in the silence of your life? Because that that presence, that emotional architecture is the very thing she will feel before you ever lay a hand on her. And once she feels that, she will never look at another man the same way again. There's a reason why some men are unforgettable. Not for their wealth, not for their words, but for how they made her feel without needing to perform. By now, you understand that touching a woman is a journey, not a physical one, but a psychological descent into her senses, her emotions, her soul, and most importantly, into yourself. Because the man who hasn't mastered himself will always fumble with her. She will feel it in the way he hesitates, in the way he hides behind charm, in the way he either clings or withdraws at the first sign of emotional fire. And she will quietly withdraw. Not because she's cold, but because she cannot anchor her warmth in a man who is adrift. So the next place she wants to be touched is in your direction. You don't need to have everything figured out, but you must walk like you know where you're going. Masculine energy is directional energy. It is forward motion, guided by purpose. It doesn't drift, it decides. And the man who walks with intent, who moves through the world like he belongs in it, becomes magnetic not by force, but by flow. When you're clear on who you are and where you're headed, your energy sharpens. Your presence becomes like a blading, clean, focused, unapologetically precise. And that sharpness, tempered with grace, is what allows the feminine to relax, because she knows you are not looking to her to complete you. A woman cannot be your compass. She is your companion, your mirror, your muse. But your direction must be your own. This is where Jung's archetypes come to life. The warrior, the king, the magician, the lover. Each of these inner figures lives in every man, but they are only activated through conscious choice, through responsibility, through trial. And when you lead yourself, you no longer need to lead her, because your life becomes a current. And if she chooses to step into it, she feels elevated, not consumed. This is the masculine frame, not a cage but a container, a vessel into which she can pour her chaotic, beautiful waters without drowning you. But she will test that container, not to destroy it, but to trust it. She'll challenge your certainty, your values, your boundaries. Not out of malice, but instinct. She needs to know that your spine is real, that your calm is earned, that your direction not be shaken by her moods. And if you crumble, if you collapse into apology, defensiveness, or rage, she will know you were pretending. But if you smiled, if you breathed, if you say less and hold morig, she'll feel your strength like a storm feels the mountain. And in that moment, something ancient in her begins to surrender, not to a man who dominates her, but to a man who no longer needs her approval to feel whole. That surrender is sacred, but it cannot be coerced. It must be invited through power and patience. This brings us to one of the most overlooked places a woman is to be touched in your devotion. Not to her, to your craft, your discipline, your mission. You see, there is nothing more magnetic to a woman than a man who belongs to something bigger than her. A man who wakes up with hunger, not just for her body, but for the life he's building, for the art he's shaping, for the legacy he's forging in silence. Because the man who is driven by purpose becomes unpredictable in the most alluring way. He disappears into his grind, he vanishes into creation, he doesn't orbit her. He builds gravity. And that gravity is irresistible. She doesn't want you to be available every moment. She wants to feel the tension of your absence, to miss you, to wonder what world you're building while she's not watching. That's the dance. The woman doesn't want to be your everything. She wants to witness the man you become when she's not around. Because when you return, you bring more than just attention. You bring energy, you bring story, you bring depth. And that depth, it touches her in places no hand ever could. This is the paradox of masculine polarity. The more you serve your purpose, the more attractive you become. Not because you neglect her, but because you are full when you arrive. A man with nothing going on becomes a burden. A man who is lit from within becomes a mystery. So pursue mastery, not for praise, but for presence. Become so immersed in your path that she feels lucky to be near your fire. That fire, that self-sourced intensity, is the light by which she will see you differently than every other man. And yet, even fire needs containment. Even energy needs stillness. That's why the next place a woman wants to be touched is in your restraint, the ability to not act, to not reach, to not indulge, to sit in the heat of your own desire and hold it. Most men touch too soon, speak too soon, lean in too fast. But the magnetic man waits. He lets the tension build. He lets her imagination work. He lets her come closer by choice, not pressure. And this waiting, this elegant control, is the ultimate seduction. Because it says, I do not need to take. I wait until it's given. And when it is given, freely, fully, in her own timing, it becomes sacred. It becomes hers. Now she feels chosen. Now she feels safe. Now she feels alive. This is what separates hunger from mastery. Anyone can want a woman. Few men can create the space for her to want herself more in his presence. That is the gift of the restrained man. He awakens not just her desire, but her sovereignty. He doesn't conquer her. He reveals her to herself. And that, my friend, is the deepest touch of all. So the question isn't how do I touch a woman? It's what do I awaken in her by who I've become? Because when you become a man of depth, she will feel your touch in every word, every look, every silence. And her body will respond, not to your hands, but to your energy. Which part of this has struck you the hardest so far? And which part are you still afraid to master? Let's go even deeper. By now, you've realized something. Touch is not about hands. It's about energy. Every word, every pause, every glance carries frequency. And the men who understand this don't chase women. They tune into them. Because a woman is not a code to crack. She is a frequency to match. And the final place she longs to be touched is the one no man dares reach unless he's earned her imagination. Not the shallow surface of fantasy, but the rich, layered world inside her mind. The hidden landscape where her stories, her secrets, her sensuality live. Most men never get close. They try to stimulate her body before they've ever stirred her psyche. But the magnetic man, he bypasses the obvious. He doesn't entertain her. He awakens her. And that awakening begins with something radical. Curiosity. Not the kind that interrogates, but the kind that explores. The kind of curiosity that listens without trying to fix. That asks questions without agenda. That savors her answers. When you show a woman that her mind is just as intriguing to you as her body, she begins to bloom. Because now, you're not just trying to possess her. You're playing with her soul first. This is where true psychological seduction begins. When she's in the middle of her day and your words echo in her thoughts. When your presence lingers, not in her skin, but in her story. You become more than a man. You become a myth inside her. This is why Jung's idea of archetypes is so essential. Because a woman doesn't fall for you. She falls for what you represent. The king who makes her feel cherished. The warrior who makes her feel safe. The magician who makes her feel seen. The lover who makes her feel alive. When these energies move through you, something divine happens. She doesn't just want to be near you. She wants to be transformed by you. And that transformation doesn't come from trying to impress her. It comes from embodying your truth so fully that she can't help but feel hers more deeply in your presence. That is the final touch, the unseen touch, the psychic touch. Because once a woman feels touched in her imagination, you live in her forever. Not as a memory, but as a mystery. And this, my friend, is the death of the nice game. No more begging for attention. No more seeking validation. No more shallow tricks or desperate compliments. Because once you learn to touch her mind, her body follows you willingly. Her emotions open willingly. Her devotion flows willingly, not out of obligation, but out of magnetism. And magnetism cannot be faked. It is the natural gravity of a man who has integrated all of himself, his discipline, his pain, his shame, his desire, his purpose. He is not a boy who needs her to fill the void. He is a man who is so full of life, it spills into her. That's the secret no one teaches. You don't chase women. You become so deeply embodied that women remember how much of themselves they've abandoned, and your presence becomes their invitation home. That's not manipulation. That's emotional sovereignty. That's what happens when your masculine energy is no longer leaking from wounds, but radiating from your center. And once you've touched that center in yourself, you don't need to prove anything ever again. You walk differently. You speak less, but say more. You radiate stillness in a world that's addicted to noise. And in that stillness, she feels you. She wants you, not just to claim her, but to elevate her. Because the deepest truth is this: she doesn't want a man who gives her the world. She wants a man who reminds her she is the world. And when your gaze reflects that back to her, when your voice whispers through her bones, when your presence evokes the goddess she forgot she was, you will never need to touch her again to be unforgettable. So let this land deeply. A woman wants to be touched in 7 places: her attention, her sense of safety, her soul, her uniqueness, her imagination, her emotional weather, and her own divine essence reflected in your presence. But each of these places is guarded, not by logic, but by instinct, by years of being pursued, misunderstood, objectified, and let down. So the only way in is through truth, truth in how you walk, truth in how you see her, truth in how you see yourself. Because in the end, the most attractive man is the most integrated one. So now I ask you, King, which of these 7 touches have you already mastered? And which one will you begin applying? Starting now. Let me know in the comments. Not for you. Because how you show up in the world is how she will show up in front of you. And when you've mastered this, you won't just attract women. You'll attract the right woman. The one who's been waiting for a man like you to remember who he is. Now go. Build the presence that makes her feel everything before you've even said a word.